Dr. John Richardson. His Department of Forest and Conservation Sciences at the University of British Columbia. I'm mostly interested in understanding how ecosystems work and have used freshwaters as my main study system for well over 4 decades. That term herptiles or herps, it includes reptiles and amphibians. So frogs and toads and even garter snakes. Many of them are feeding on insects, and some of those insects are harmful to plants. So having a few frogs and toads and other things around can be beneficial to farmers. However, they are also sensitive to many of the things we do because they need places to hide. They don't do well with high concentrations of nutrients or with pesticides because most amphibians absorb some of these things through their skin. And in many farms are absolutely devoted to just crops, and it's very difficult for them to find a good place to hide from potential predators. And the other thing is that many farms are dry much of the time. So even though they might irrigate, there's not a lot of moisture at the surface where these animals might hide. And the last thing is really just toxic chemicals. For many farms, they're very dependent still on various pesticides, which are of course toxic to pretty much anything that lives in the soils and on the soils. So if we're managing farms that are sustainable, then we often have low pesticides, low nutrients, a little bit of structure that allows for places for these animals to hide from their predators. And so it can be an indicator as well. There are a lot of different species out there, and it really depends where one is. Here in British Columbia, we have about 21 species of amphibians, and we have about 12 species of snakes and a couple of lizards. So there is a lot of biodiversity, but as you go further south, especially into the sort of Midwest of the US, there are literally hundreds of species of each of these things. So for one thing, it contributes a lot to biodiversity. But in most cases, these are harmless animals in terms of humans, but they're beneficial. And so they mostly live near wet areas, at least most of them reproduce in wet areas. They really don't do any damage. There are very few things that feed on the crops that people are growing, so it's not really a problem for the farmers directly. But people still don't feel comfortable with snakes. There are very few toxic snakes or poisonous snakes in most of North America until you get down to, say, Mexico or Texas. So most of North America have maybe a couple of species of rattlers. There's cottonmouth and of course coral snakes and things like that. But beyond those few, most of them are beneficial. And so amongst our huge biodiversity of herps between the amphibians and reptiles, most of them are beneficial to us.